Once in a while I get people that really, or that claim they don't believe in evolution. And my response generally is, so why not?
Now, if we look at the definition of evolution, we can see that evolution is clearly defined as the gradual development of something, especially from a simple to a more complex form. Folks, in order for something to become more complex, you need to introduce new information. Now, for the sake of simplicity, just realize that in order for evolution to even be possible, evolutionists claim that this new information is introduced through mutations. Now, common sense suggests that mutations are usually negative things, but evolutionists are optimistic and are counting on that rare case where damage will cause information to materialize out of nowhere, just by getting extremely lucky during scrambling of the genetic code. Evolutionists acknowledge that each tiny bit of new information is extraordinarily rare, therefore they say that's why it takes millions and millions and even billions of years to happen on a noticeable scale. Evolutionists depend on mutations to generate new information in their model. That part of the model is a huge problem. The stubborn fact is that no instance of mutation making information has ever been confirmed, not even in the tiniest increment. Never, not once. There is not a single field observation or lab finding. The only thing that they've been able to find is a mutation which recombines existing information, or a mutation that results in the loss of information. But they have never found a mutation that resulted in new information being created. Never, ever, not once, not one time has that ever been proven to even be possible. Folks, adding brand new information to the genome essentially is evolution. So if there is no evidence that it has ever happened, there is no evidence for evolution at all. Furthermore, if there is no evidence at all that it is even possible, and no one has ever observed it happening, there is no way to calculate an average time frame for it to occur. You can't develop a mathematical equation to express the time needed for this beneficial mutation that would result in the creation of new information to occur. Meaning, there's no way to know how long it would take, even if it was theoretically possible. So this whole idea of it taking millions or billions of years is literally pulled out of thin air. Now at this point, many of you are probably asking yourselves, what about the fossil record? I'm sure that you have all heard at one point or another during your life that man evolved from ape. And I'm sure that you have been told about all of the different supposed transitional stages of human beings supposedly found linking Homo sapiens to apes or an ape-like creature. And all I have to say about this, folks, is that you really need to do your research. The vast majority of these are admitted and proven frauds, yet are still touted as being true. Let me give you just a few examples. Nebraska man was a name applied to Hesperopithecus Harold Cookie, a putative species of ape. Hesperopithecus meant ape of the Western world, and it was heralded as the first higher primate of North America. Now folks, this discovery of Nebraska man was entirely based on a tooth, one single tooth. And from that tooth, they somehow magically constructed an entire species that conveniently for evolutionists served as one of many necessary missing links needed to serve as evidence for man evolving from ape. Another example is Piltdown man. Now, Piltdown man was originally classified as an Eoanthropus dawsoni. Now, the problem with this particular one is that it was discovered to be a forgery in 1953 and consisted of the lower jawbone of an orangutan deliberately combined with the cranium of a fully developed modern human. Folks, the thing you have to ask yourself is, why are there so many frauds surrounding the evolution theory? Statistically speaking, these genetic mutations that result in the creation of new information are extraordinarily rare, meaning that in order for one species to transcend to the next level, as the theory of evolution dictates, they would have to cycle through hundreds, probably more like thousands upon thousands, of generations in order for this genetic fluke to occur. My point is this. Either these man-like apes should have been around for thousands and thousands of years, or at the given point in time when they did exist, there would have had to have been a huge population of them. In either case, the quote-unquote fossil record should be riddled with these bones. These archaeologists shouldn't be resorting to creating hoaxes in order to gain notoriety and fame for finding the missing link. They should literally be tripping over these things. Another one would be Lucy. Lucy was discovered by a man named Donald Johanson and was found in 1974 in the Awash Valley in Ethiopia. It was classified as an Australopithecus afarensis and only consisted of several hundred pieces of bone, representing only about 40% of the skeleton of this supposed missing link. Now, what is highly suspect about this so-called discovery is that Donald Johanson went to Ethiopia with a grant to find the missing link. Now, just 2 weeks before his grant money expired and ran out, he discovered Lucy. Highly motivated, I suspect. Now, Lucy was 3 feet tall and was obviously a chimpanzee of some kind. Now, the skull was completely crushed, so they could not tell anything about the skull. But when they depict her in museums and in textbooks, they make her appear half human and half ape. The supposed knee joint of Lucy was found over 1.5 miles away and 200 feet deeper, and the hands and feet bones were missing, yet they somehow decide to put human feet on it whenever it's illustrated. Now, one that most of you have probably heard of is Neanderthal man. Neanderthals are generally classified by biologists as the species Homo neanderthalensis. The problem is it has been proven that the Neanderthal cannot possibly be a missing link between man and ape. Neanderthals are actually thought to be superior humans with thicker bones and stronger muscles who actually lived to be very old. They also appear to have a 13% larger brain than modern man. Folks, any way you slice it, Neanderthals are not an intermediate step in the road to create modern man, but can actually be considered one step above modern man. They were smarter, stronger, faster, and bigger than we are today.
If the creatures we see today actually evolved from other kinds of creatures in the past, gradually over long periods of time, we would expect to find in the fossil record their intermediate or transitional forms with halfway structures. There should be innumerable examples of this. However, we do not observe this. Instead, what we find in the fossil record are fully formed fossils, with the exception of a handful of debatable, alleged transitional fossils Darwinists bring up. This is a serious problem for Darwinism. Charles Darwin himself worried about this issue. He wrote, "Why is not every geological formation and every stratum full of such intermediate links? Geology assuredly does not reveal any such finely graduated organic chain, and this is the most obvious and serious objection which can be urged against this theory." Around 100 years later, the famous evolutionist author Stephen Jay Gould likewise noted the fossil record does not actually support this Darwinian gradualistic view of evolution. The absence of fossil evidence for intermediary stages between major transitions in organic design, indeed our inability, even in our imagination, to construct functional intermediates in many cases, has been a persistent and nagging problem for gradualistic accounts of evolution. And I regard the failure to find a clear vector of progress in life's history as the most puzzling fact of the fossil record. But I also believe that we are now on the verge of a solution, unquote. Indeed, Gould admitted there are serious problems with the fossil record, yet he went on to claim that his punctuated equilibrium idea that evolution occurred through sudden big jumps could solve this problem. However, his proposed solution turned out to be erroneous as well. As Emil Silvestro notes, quote, "They, Gould and Eldridge, were not even willing to explain from whence such a massive addition of genetic information could have come. Thus, after Gould's passing away, punctuated equilibrium lost popularity, and gradualistic neo-Darwinism became the ruling dogma in academia again." In his work Darwin's Doubt, Stephen Meyer showed many other problems with punctuated equilibrium as well. Hence, the fossil record problem Gould admitted existed still remains. In light of concerns from such high-level evolutionists as Gould, one should be skeptical towards the popular evolutionary apologists today who try to claim the lack of intermediate forms in the fossil record is not a serious problem. The fact is that fully formed organisms appear abruptly in the fossil record. For example, the chemist and science writer Jonathan Sarfati notes, "The first bats and birds in the fossil record are indeed fully fledged flyers. Moreover, the oldest known turtle in the fossil record is fully formed. We have no intermediates between turtles and cotylosaurs, which are the organisms evolutionists claim turtles supposedly came from. And the quote-unquote imperfection of the fossil record excuse will not work, since organisms like turtles leave excellent fossils but still show no intermediates. This is because macroevolution is a delusion." Although Darwin himself, as well as modern Darwinists today, claim that the reason we do not find these transitional forms is because the fossil record is supposedly imperfect, this attempt at saving face will not work for other reasons as well. John D. Morris notes, "Extensive exploration and fossil discovery in the following years after Darwin have not brought such in-between forms to light. The vast majority of taxonomic orders and families which live today are also found as fossils, yet without fossil transitions." Indeed, this is confirmed by biochemist Michael Denton, who, in his work Evolution: A Theory in Crisis, showed 97.7% of living orders of land vertebrates are represented as fossils, as well as 79.1% of living families of land vertebrates, 87.8% if birds are excluded, as they are less likely to become fossilized. In fact, all 32 mammal orders appear abruptly and fully formed in the fossil record. So the idea the fossil record is incomplete is false. Now, Darwin also tried to address the transitional fossil problem by claiming the alleged imperfection of the fossil record was, quote, "chiefly due to organic beings not inhabiting profound depths of the sea." However, Emil Silvestro notes, this excuse is likewise false, since the idea life did not exist in the depths of the sea has since been disproven. A final word on transitional forms from Sarfati, quote, "The inability to imagine functional intermediates is a real problem. If a bat or bird evolved from a land animal, the transitional forms would have forelimbs that were neither good legs nor good wings. So how would such things be selected? The fragile long limbs of hypothetical halfway stages of bats and pterosaurs would seem more like a hindrance than a help," unquote. The Cambrian explosion is a very strong refutation of macroevolution as well. The Cambrian refers to an early period of geologic history. Scientist Stephen Meyer notes, "During this geological period, many new and anatomically sophisticated creatures appear suddenly in the sedimentary layers of the geologic column, without any evidence of simpler ancestral forms in the earlier layers below. If macroevolution is true, and these creatures in the Cambrian evolved from simpler forms, the earlier layers below should contain such forms, but they do not. This is a serious problem for Darwinism." Another aspect of the Cambrian explosion is brought out by John D. Morris, quote, "The Cambrian explosion constitutes a major episode in the history of life. If evolution were true, one would expect the record to start with one type of animal, then increase to two, and so on. Yet fossil studies have shown that essentially all phyla were present at the start, each distinct from the others, and each fully equipped to function and survive. Even vertebrate fish were present in the Lower Cambrian. There is no evolutionary tree found in the fossils, as Darwin and his disciples have claimed. Rather, it is more like a lawn than a tree. Indeed, this data troubled Charles Darwin a lot, and he admitted it was a very difficult problem for his theory. Even over 100 years later, the evolutionist Professor Geoffrey Levington admitted this is evolution's, quote, deepest paradox, end quote. Moreover, in regards to Darwinian attempts at answering the Cambrian explosion, paleontologist Mark McMenamin conceded, "It is hard for us paleontologists, steeped as we are in the tradition of Darwinian analysis, to admit that neo-Darwinian explanations for the Cambrian explosion have failed miserably. New data acquired in recent years, instead of solving Darwin's dilemma, have rather made it worse. Thus, one should be skeptical when evolution apologists claim the Cambrian explosion is not a problem."
Now this brings me to a problem which should be obvious to anyone who supports the theory of evolution and who also considers themselves to be a scientist. And that is that evolution adamantly and vehemently defies entropy, or in other words, the second law of thermodynamics. This fundamental law clearly expresses that over time things degrade, things become more random, that things decline over time. A common sense way of looking at this, and something that should be obvious, is that we see species go extinct. They don't come into existence. We aren't seeing an increase, we're actually seeing a decrease. In fact, while we're at it, let me just quickly rattle off a few other fundamental scientific principles that evolution violates in one way or another. We've already talked about entropy, but it also violates biogenesis, Mendel's law of genetics, spontaneous generation, law of information systems, specified complexity, irreducible complexity, statistical mathematics, natural law, beneficial mutation, genetic complexity, and information theory. Now folks, I must ask, how on earth can evolution be classified or considered a scientific fact when even at a fundamental level, even if proven possible, does not prove that it actually happened, has never actually even been proven possible scientifically, has been repeatedly discredited through fossil findings and recent research, hangs the majority of its most significant pieces of evidence on proven hoaxes, and defies numerous well-established scientific principles? Folks, at the end of the day, there is absolutely no way to quantify evolution as a fact or a certainty. It is a belief, and a religious one at that. People follow this theory devotedly and base their entire view of the universe and how it works on this theory.
You guys believe 20 billion years ago there was a Big Bang where nothing exploded and produced everything. 4.6 billion years ago the Earth cooled down, made a hard rocky crust. It rained on the rocks for millions of years, turned them into soup, and the soup came alive 3 billion years ago. Found somebody to marry, and something to eat, of course, and slowly evolved into everything we see today. There are some lies in our science books. Taught it for 15 years. Even though I'm not teaching it anymore, I still like to study. It's so many neat things to learn. We're going to cover some of that tonight. I'm not against science, I'm not against schools, I'm not against teachers, because most of them don't know what they believe. You have to tell them. They teach the kids it all started with a Big Bang 20 billion years ago. What exploded? This is what the textbooks teach.
Before the Big Bang, there was nothing, literally nothing, an infinitesimal nugget of space. And then something happened, triggering the most colossal explosion in history.
Yes, boys and girls, you see, nothing exploded, and here we are. So I asked this professor if I could ask him some questions about the Big Bang. I said, where did all this matter come from? He said, well, we don't know that for sure. I said, well, sir, would you please tell me where the laws came from? The universe is run by laws, gravity, centrifugal force, inertia. Who gave the laws? He said, we don't know that either. I said, sir, could you tell me where the energy came from? You know, it takes energy to make a big bang. Who bought the gas to run this machine anyway? He said, we don't know that either. I said, sir, could I ask you another question? He said, sure. What else would you like to know? Else? What do you mean else? You haven't told me nothing yet. I said, does Berkeley have a merry-go-round? You see, if a spinning object breaks apart in a frictionless environment, the fragments will all spin the same direction. The professor said, yes, I understand about the conservation of angular momentum. I said, well, good. I'd like to ask you a question then, sir. If the whole universe began as a swirling dot, like you said, why do two planets spin backwards? He said, that's interesting. I said, no, that's more than interesting. It's kind of hard on your Big Bang Theory. Not only that, 6 of the moons are spinning backwards. Why? He said, I don't know. Why do you think they're going backwards? I was hoping he was going to ask that. I said, okay, now, sir, hold it. If I told you that I believe God created the heaven and the earth like the Bible teaches, you're going to say, and where did God come from? And I don't know. But you said, well, we don't know that for sure. We don't know that either. Don't tell me my theory is religious and yours is science. Oh, no, sir, they're both religious. Evolution is a religion. You have to believe. So ask the professor, where did the matter come from? He said, I don't know. So basically, I believe in the beginning God, and you believe in the beginning dirt. One professor was getting kind of upset about this time. He said, Mr. Hovind, there are hundreds of varieties of dogs in the world. He said, do you mean to tell me that you believe all these dogs came from 2 dogs off a Noah's Ark? You expect me to believe that? I said, sir, would you look at what you're teaching your students? You're teaching your students that all the dogs in the world came from a rock.
Charles Darwin was disciplined. I mean, he did these extraordinary experiments, this series of experiments.
Then they're going to tell the kids, well, we have evidence for this theory. Charlie Darwin stopped off at these islands right there called the Galapagos Islands. Charlie studied the birds very carefully and said, you know what? I think all these birds had a common ancestor. I bet you're right, Charlie. It was a bird. You see 14 kinds of birds, and you conclude that birds and bananas are related.
Here are these ancient dinosaur bones or fossils.
They tell the kids they have evidence of evolution from fossils. I don't think so. If you find a fossil in the dirt, all you know is it died. You don't know that it had any kids. And you sure don't know that it had different kids. You bring in a bone to the judge. Judge, I found this bone in the dirt. This is the ancestor of all the humans today. They would laugh at you. You don't know that that's the ancestor of anybody. And why on earth would you think a bone in the dirt can do something animals today cannot do? They'll say, boys and girls, you have 2 bones in your wrist, radius and ulna. And boys and girls, look at the whale's flipper carefully. Did you know the whale has 2 bones in his flipper? And they're called the radius and the ulna? Same as ours. Wow. Who named them, teacher? The whale? Think about it.
I'm here to tell my people it's time to stop believing bull just because of tell you bull with a straight look on their face. Evolution say people came from monkeys. And the question is, why is there still monkeys? Is these the retarded monkeys? They didn't turn into people just yet.
Even Stephen Gould admitted the absence of fossil evidence for intermediary stages is a persistent and nagging problem for evolution. See, what's happened, these guys have looked for missing links in the fossil record. They can't find any, and so they say, well, maybe evolution happened so fast it wasn't preserved. Maybe a reptile laid an egg and a bird hatched out. Well, who did that bird marry?
This process that brought us to be is billions of years old. It happens very fast, billions of years fast. Here is radioactivity.
We're going to tell the kids in the late 1940s they invented carbon dating. We're going to explain a little bit about radiometric dating and how it's supposed to work, and then show you that it does not work, okay? It sounds good, but there are some assumptions that mess everything up. If we had walked into a room and found a candle burning on the table, and I asked you the question, when was it lit? You say, I don't know, Mr. Hovind, it's burning when I got here. Okay, well then let's do some empirical science. Let's measure the height of the candle. Suppose the candle is 7 inches tall. Who can tell me when it was lit? Okay, nobody. Let's do some more empirical science. Let's measure the rate of burn. Suppose we determine it's burning 1 inch an hour. When was it lit? You're going to have a hard time telling me unless you're willing to make some assumptions. You find a fossil in the dirt. You can measure how much C14 is in it. Very accurately, by the way. And you can measure how fast it's decaying. That's just like measuring the height of your candle and how fast it's burning. Now, when did that animal die? You don't have a clue. Here's what you ought to consider about carbon dating. Samples of known age, it doesn't work. If it's a sample of unknown age, it is assumed to work.
It's just really a hard thing. It's really a hard thing. Your world just becomes fantastically complicated when you don't believe in evolution.
Freshly killed seal, carbon dated 1,300 years old. Shells from living snails, carbon dated 27,000 years old. Living penguins, carbon dated 8,000 years old. One part of Dima was 40,000 years old, another part was 26,000, and the wood next to it is 9,000. Then they tell the kids about the geologic column. They say each of the layers is a different age, you know, Cenozoic, Mesozoic, Paleozoic, Archaeozoic, all them Zoic boys. Now, if you get a petrified tree standing up, running through different rock layers, I don't think it's smart to say those layers are vastly different ages. Those trees did not get slowly covered by the sediments over millions of years. They would rot and fall down.
Crazy.
They'll say, boys and girls, you have an appendix that you don't need anymore. That's a vestigial structure. That's proof of evolution. Well, excuse me, you do need your appendix. The appendix is part of your immune system. If your appendix is taken out, you can still live, okay, but it increases your susceptibility to quite a few diseases. You could live without both your legs and both your arms and both your eyes also. That doesn't prove you don't need them. There are no vestigial organs, and even if there were, that would be the opposite of evolution. That's losing, not gaining. I was taught when I went to school, man used to have a tail, but he lost it because he didn't need it. I thought, didn't need it? Have you ever thought how handy a tail would be? Have you ever come to the door with 2 sacks of groceries? Wouldn't that be nice, man, be able to grab that door and walk right around and get in it? Lost it because we didn't need it. Man, you could drive the car and tune the radio knob and hold the Coke at the same time.
What we're finding is that natural selection seems to be an incredibly important factor in generating new species.
Natural selection, the key evolutionary mechanism Darwin identified.
The bad designs get eaten by the good ones, and so all you have is good ones.
Why is there still monkeys?
Natural selection doesn't cause any evolution. It makes sure the bad ones don't survive, but it's not going to change it to something else.
That's what evolution is.
If you worked in a factory that produced cars, and your job was to check for defects, and you caught every single mistake, and you rejected it, how long would it take that process to change the car to an airplane? You say it'll never change it. That's my point. The students are taught we have evidence from development. Darwin considered this by far the strongest single class of evidence. This textbook says the human embryo growing in the mother has gills like a fish. Those little folds of skin are not gills. Those little wrinkles under your chin when you're growing up later develop into bones in the ear and glands in the throat. They never have anything to do with breathing. I've seen folks that have 5 or 6 chins and they can't breathe through any of them but the top one. Those are not gill slits. Ernst Haeckel, though, said the turning point in his thinking was when he read Darwin's book. He made huge charts of his posters of his drawings of these embryos and traveled all over Germany and just about by himself converted the Germans to believing in evolution. Haeckel took a drawing of a dog and a human embryo and he changed them to make them look exactly alike. On top are Haeckel's fake drawings. Underneath are actual photographs of what he claimed he was drawing a picture of. Now, either he's a lousy artist or he's a liar. Well, it turns out he's a liar. He was convicted of fraud by his own university, proven to be a fraud. But guess what? Haeckel's fake drawings are still used in textbooks in your state right now. It's only been proven wrong 125 years ago. I know it takes a while to get textbooks up to date, but that ought to be plenty of time. Adolf Hitler said, "You let me control the textbooks, I'll control the state." Watch this sentence here carefully. Some kid's doing this for homework tonight. Boys and girls, do you think humans are still evolving? Now, what kind of question is that? Doesn't that question assume that evolution has happened? What if a kid doesn't believe in evolution? How's he supposed to do his homework tonight? That question does not teach him how to think critically. That teaches him what to think, not how to think. And when the kid gets done with this course, he's going to think he knows how to think. But he doesn't. He knows how to be told what to think. Brainwashing at taxpayer expense. They want to use my tax dollars to teach that to your kids in our schools.
If you want to deny evolution, that's fine. But don't make your kids do it, because we need them.
And that's where the problem comes in. Okay? If you want to believe in the Big Bang, just enjoy yourself, but keep your religion at home. The Russian atheist astronomer came to America and spoke at one of the universities, and he said, started off his speech, he said, "Folks, Either there is a God or there isn't. Both possibilities are frightening. If there is no God, we're in trouble. We're hurtling through space around the sun right now at 66,000 miles an hour, and nobody's in charge. That's a scary thought. But if God made the world, He owns it. That means He makes the rules. You see, if there is a God, we better find out who He is.